Hello everyone, I'm your 2019-2021 Miss Lumbee Taylor Brooke Locklear, proudly promoting my personal platform, Rise Up, Redefining Indigenous Strength in Everyone Through Unity and Perseverance. With me today, I have my fellow ambassadors and I would like for them to introduce themselves.
Proudly promoting my personal platform, Be a Hero, teaching our community to hear, encourage, reach, and overcome any crisis we may face. I am your Teen Miss Lumbee 2019-2021, Kyla Leanne Jarrett.
Proud to be a young Indigenous woman of the Lumbee tribe, I am Junior Miss Lumbee 2019-2021, Kennedy Elizabeth Locklear.
Honored to represent the largest Native American tribe east of the Mississippi River, I'm your 2019-2021 Little Miss Lumbee Riley Madison Dial.
Last year we had the opportunity to visit many different schools in the area. We really did love it. Due to COVID-19, we will be unable to attend the schools during the month of November, which is Native American Heritage Month. This year we will be coming to you virtually. It is still very important to us to continue to share and teach our culture. Each ambassador has chosen a different topic in the Lumbee culture to share with you. The first segment I will be doing, which focuses on the importance of faith in the Lumbee culture.
My segment is about the University of North Carolina at Pembroke and how it is the foundation of success for our Lumbee people.
My presentation focuses on the dependency of the Lumbee people on land and farming for survival throughout the years.
Lastly, my segment will teach about powwows and demonstrate different styles of dancing.
Hello everyone, I'm your 2019-2021 Miss Lumbee Taylor Brooke Locklear, proudly promoting my platform of Rise Up, Redefining Indigenous Strength in Everyone Through Unity and Perseverance. So my first topic, I'm doing the first segment on the faith in the Lumbee culture, and with me today I have Dr. Mike Cummins.
My name is Mike Cummings. I'm a pastor right now. I retired from right here in this building. The office here is called Burnt Swamp Baptist Association. My wife and I were here. She was here 40 years and I was here 30 years. And so I actually retired from here. A younger man is in our office now doing a great job. But I am a pastor. I'm a pastor over at Deep Branch Church. And I'm happy to be meeting with Taylor today, discussing, at least from my perspective and my point of view, faith development among us through our churches in the last, 140 years or so.
Okay, well I have a few questions for you that I'm going to go ahead and ask. Tell us a little about yourself and how long you've been in the ministry.
I started, actually, I guess you would say, in earnest. My ministry started as a young pastor. I was a sophomore in college. I was in school at Carolina. 1969, responded to the call of God to preach and got some invitations around in the area churches to speak. I grew up in Bear Swamp Church, just right down the road from where we are. I grew up there, Bear Swamp, pretty much all my life, as I remember. And one of the places that I was offered opportunity to preach in the fall of 1969 was in Sampson County, among the Kahari Indian people, some of the sweetest people among Indian people anywhere in the world. And actually my wife is from there. So I started as a young pastor, second year college student. And I don't know how in the world they ever decided to invite me and call me to be their preacher. Being that young, you'd think a church is crazy and out of its mind to call some 19-year-old inexperienced young man to come in and be their preacher. But that's pretty much the beginning of my preaching ministry. My whole life has been somehow or another steeped in church life since a child. And so church was not something I became acquainted with at 18 or 19 years old. I was in church from the time I was able to recognize anything.
Okay. who was or were the founders of Burnt Swamp Association, and why was it founded?
Yeah. Burnt Swamp Association formed, the official formation, official meeting, business meeting where it was formed was 1881. Now, we believe from just kind of oral traditions that there were some churches meeting 3 or 4 years earlier, maybe 1877. And the 3 churches that were meeting, one was over in Burnt Swamp Union Chapel community, over in that area. One was in the Saddle Tree community. And the other was actually down around the Back Swamp, Fairmont area. And the 3 churches, Burnt Swamp Church, which is still one of our thriving churches, Reedy Branch Church, which is a very strong, thriving church. And the 3rd church was a church called Magnolia. Now we know Magnolia School is over there, but the Magnolia Church, I think it discontinued, but it reformed. That body of folks reformed, and there's a Mount Moriah Church over there. There's a 10 Mile Center Church over there. So for sure, there was a strong faith community evidently in the Saddle Tree community. So even though the Magnolia Church by name may have gone away, there are 2 or 3 other churches that came right back up in that community.
Okay.
Some of those early leaders, the name of Blanks, Blanks is a good Saddle Tree, St. Paul name. Bell, Bell, that's a name you'll find common over their surname. In the Burnt Swamp community were the Wilkins, Oxendine, some of those folks in the Burnt Swamp community. Down in the Back Swamp area, the Hunts. I think Reverend J.W. Blanks and Brother Blanks, and I can't get the other pastor's name, may have been helping to develop in the early days in the Reedy Branch community, but they soon had, and I think they did in the very earliest days, had some Hunt preachers. But those were, it appeared to be the 3 communities out of which the Burnt Swamp Association formed. And it's an interesting story how we formed, by the way. We actually formed with the help of some really good-hearted white men. They were Baptist men from over in the Cliven Pines area. Actually, some of our, I think Burnt Swamp Church may have even been served by one of those pastors, Brother Pravat. They were Pravat, father and son. And they had a really good heart toward our Indian people and helping our Indian people develop around the gospel and build their churches. But further, more than that, help to build what we call now the Burnt Swamp Association. Now, an association in the Southern Baptist denominational structure is kind of a regional grouping of churches, for largely within the boundaries of a county, but not limited to the boundaries of a county. But normally churches in a county area would come together as Southern Baptists, and they would form a fellowship, a family of churches, so to speak, where they get to know each other, get to encourage each other, and to feel like they had an organization of churches that they belong to. Well, our Indian churches, this was very early in the days of the development of Indian churches. And of course, they were community churches. They were community-based, owned and operated by local communities. And but from those 3 churches, the Burnt Swamp Association has expanded over the years. Now, those were Lumbee communities. Weren't called Lumbee then. We might have been called the mixed race, or we might have been called Cherokee. But we were called by different designations, but we were not called Lumbee. But at any rate, those 3 churches were right here in Robeson County. Since then, the Burnt Swamp family or fellowship of churches has expanded into 4 other Indian communities. I mentioned my wife being Kahari. That's the church where I served as a 19-year-old at New Bethel. And we also have churches in the Waccamaw Siouan community. Are you familiar with the Waccamaw Siouan? Sweet people, just precious people. Halawa Saponi, just the dearest people, the Halawa Saponi people. And we have let's see, is that 4 tribes? And we visited. There's a Maharan group up near Winton, and they're not part of our fellowship, but we're friendly with them and we know them. There's a church just north of, just near the Virginia line, near Danville, Virginia. They're not part of our fellowship, but there are some Saponi people from that community who moved here and live here, and so we're much in good fellowship with them, although they're not members of our association. It's an interesting thing, and this will blow your mind, I guess. In our annual meeting last week, we voted to include a Navajo church in our fellowship of Burnt Swamp Association. And it's not really that far away. It's just 2,500 miles over there. But it was a church that many of our folks had relationships with. And they wanted to belong to a fellowship or a family or a community of Indian churches, which is what Burnt Swamp in its earliest days, we were by and large Indian churches. And we were Indian churches because, 140, 50 years ago, our interaction with people of other races was not really that common.
Right.
And so Indians formed their churches in that way. Now I can go on and on. Let you ask me another question.
So as Lumbee people, we are deeply rooted in our Christian faith. Explain to me how that's tied in with our education.
Oh, that's a beautiful question. In the days in the 1870s, 1860s, 1880s, there was actually no publicly provided school. There were no publicly provided schools in our Indian community. So kids being educated, children being educated in our Indian communities was really fell on the backs of local community leaders. That's the way churches formed. Churches formed from local community leaders, or they became community leaders. And so this is interesting because in the communities where a little school would develop for the kids in that community, oftentimes a church was forming right alongside it, beside that church. So it's kind of like a double track. Education and spirituality were moving forward together, and the leaders in our community were leaders in both. Now, those schools were not publicly funded. They were called subscription schools. And there must have been over 20 some of them later on as the schools began to develop in communities all over the county. I don't know exactly how many there were. There were more than 20. And in many of the locations where a little school was forming, a little church was right beside it. Sometimes the church was first and the school came along later, and they shared the same building. That subscription school that I'm talking about, first of all, was kind of private, locally owned and operated. The government of it was by the local community, and the state of North Carolina was really not funding education of Indians. So it really fell upon the local community leaders. And when you look back over that, you just have to honor those kinds of leaders 140 and 50 years ago who saw how important education was to their children, and that they stepped out and sacrificially provided schools and churches. And that kind of foresight is what's enabled us as Lumbee people, I believe, to become as progressive and to become as forward-looking and forward behaving people that we've become. We're not a people that have been dependent upon someone else to come and look after us and build us up. There has been so much initiative from our own local leadership going way back in the 1800s. And for instance, I'm over at Deep Branch Church as a pastor. Right across the road is Deep Branch School. Well, Deep Branch Church formed in 1882. I'm not sure when there was a little school there somewhere, but eventually the school was right there where the church is. And I've heard stories from some of the folks about at times whenever the church was the schoolhouse, the kids would meet at the church. And so I don't know that story in detail, But I know that's pretty common. Union Chapel, there's a church, across the road is a school. Prospect, here's a church, across the road is the school. And there's a number of communities like that. Magnolia School, right down the road from the churches that are there. Mount Elam Church in Hope County, formed right there where a little school called Jacobs Point existed. Now we know of the Hawkeye School now. It used to be called South Oak Hawkeye School now, but that history is such a beautiful story of how church and school developed along side by side and building up our communities and our people 150, 140 years ago. Beautiful story.
Yeah, I do agree.
Yeah.
I've got one more question for you, and that's a little bit more detailed.
Okay.
So, you're viewed as the preacher among preachers. Everyone knows you, and everyone that I've spoken to has had nothing but positive and uplifting comments to say about you. Your reputation definitely precedes itself, and we have been fortunate and blessed that God has used you in a mighty way that He has. I am sure that we have young Christians and converts watching us today, and we sometimes can get discouraged. Was there ever a time in your life when you were unsure of what you were doing in regards to God's calling on your life? What advice would you give young people today?
Yeah, I can begin with that in just responding to what I felt like was God's call to come to ministry. I was in school at Chapel Hill, and I was thinking about my career and what all that was going to develop into. But it was in Bible study on the campus of Chapel Hill where the challenge I felt like was coming from God. This is not what I want you to be doing. I want you to come back and to where you grew up and get involved in church. I want you to preach. So that I guess I struggled with that for 2 or 3 years and trying to work that out. And almost any minister you talk to nowadays will talk about that time he was being called of God to come to ministry, how he struggled with being right about that. You want to be right about that. You can easily embarrass yourself in our local community by making a step like that and then deciding that wasn't what you need to be doing, and I didn't want to make a mistake. I really didn't want to make a mistake. So that was a challenge for me. But I think maybe even a larger challenge than that. I had been a pastor in Sampson County 10 years, and the decision to move back home was quite challenging for me because it was such a dear people to me. It's my wife's family there, and I don't know that you'll ever find a more hospitable and genuinely gracious community than you will find in Sampson County. It was tough to leave Sampson County to come back home, but I really felt the compelling of the Lord to come back now into Robeson County. And so I did. And I came to Mount Airy Church and was there 10 years. I loved every day I was there. I had some things that were frustrating along. Every pastor does. But I loved that church. I loved the people. And our director here at the Burnt Swamp Association left the association, and we were without a leader in our association. And I was well liked by the pastors, and I've just been blessed with a beautiful friendship with pastors all my life. And at 19 years of age, everybody who was a preacher was older than me. So it started off for me that my best friends were old people, old preachers. But after about 18, 20 years in preaching ministry myself, the decision to leave a church and to come to this work, I suppose, was the biggest challenge for me because I loved being a pastor. I loved being in a community with people. And then leaving that to come here was one of the hardest things easily one of the hardest things I ever did. It took me over a year just to agree that this was the step that God was offering me. And I did that undergirded by the prayers and the wooing of pastors who were constantly saying to me, this door is a door that's open for you and you need to hear the invitation of God to come here. So I finally decided to come here. My wife was already here. She had been here 10 years as secretary. And so it turned out to be one of the most important steps in my life was to come to the Burnt Swamp Association as director. For sitting in this place, I was familiar with Indian people in other of our North Carolina, Eastern North Carolina communities, but I became more intimate with them. I learned how to fall in love with Indian people beyond just our Lumbee community. I learned to appreciate the richness of our culture and our people, bright people, good-looking people, and people who love their communities. I learned here that the Burnt Swamp Association was not just a Pembroke. It was not just a Pembroke initiative. We were doing newsletters early on, and I noticed that there were about as many Lumberton addresses receiving newsletters as there were from Pembroke. And then there was Fairmont, and then there was Roland, and then there was St. Paul. And God just showed me, says, man, this association represents people just all over, not just this county, but beyond this county. And this place can be just so strategically valuable toward the encouragement and the building up of churches and supporting of church leaders like no other element of our church life. And so it turned out to be one of the most glorious 30 years that I spent. And by being in here, I was offered some opportunity at state level representation. I was called up at the state convention to actually be president of all of our Baptists in North Carolina. At that time, that was over 1 million Baptists. And, our relationship with white Baptists, black Baptists over the years was very respectful, but Indians remained Indians, blacks remained black churches, and whites remained in white churches. We just did not have the interconnectedness, the interracial fellowships like we do now. Now, matter of fact, now if you say Indian church around here, you're not really telling completely the truth, because there's probably somebody in that church that's not an Indian.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I think there is a hearty effort being made now to be inclusive and to say to people, whoever you are, this might be historically an Indian church, but you are so welcome to the fellowship in this church. That's what I found at Deep Branch, that it's historically it's an Indian church, built by Indians and funded through the year by Indians, but now it is much broader than that.
Right.
And that's one of the beautiful things happening that I see in the life of the Burnt Swamp churches here, and not just Burnt Swamp, but all the other denominations as well. And so my experience at Burnt Swamp has been, I suppose, it's been very challenging, but very rewarding as well. So 3 years ago, we had an opportunity to step aside for younger leadership. And within just a few months, I saw how right that decision was, because younger pastors, younger church leaders were beginning to bond with Brother Steve, and he has done such a beautiful job of stepping in place now, because Burnt Swamp Association is not about Mike Cummings. When I found Burnt Swamp Association here and strong when I became aware of it, and I knew that my dream was to see it always be there for our people. And Brother Steve coming in behind me is just one way that God is continuing its impact. Now, don't get me wrong, the Baptists were not the first among the Indians.
Right.
Presbyterian, Methodists were there before us. And we've always worked alongside our Methodist Pentecostal folk. Pentecostals came along in the 1900s. And we've just had a beautiful coexistence together, because we're basically Bible people.
Right.
We're just Bible-loving, Bible-believing, Bible-preaching people. And that's been my story and my experience.
Well, I do appreciate your time today. That sounds like you've had many amazing experiences throughout your years. Maybe Brother Steve will get to do this one day.
I think he'll
with another Miss Lumbee.
Yeah, that's right. And I expect that he'll do even greater things. better thing, because he's got so many people right there with him, helping him. That's how you get there. You just don't get there on your own.
That's right. Well, thank you again.
You bet.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, my name is Kyla Jarrett, and I am Teen Miss Lumbee. I am standing before you at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, where I am a freshman. The University of North Carolina at Pembroke was established in 1887 and was originally known as the Croatan Normal School. At this time, American Indians were not allowed to attend institutions of higher learning, such as the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Our ancestors originally founded this university to help train Native teachers because they understood the importance of education for the advancement of our people. The University of North Carolina at Pembroke is the first American Indian university. It is now home to a very diverse population with over 8,000 students. I am standing before you at Old Main, which is the most recognizable building on UNC Pembroke's campus. Old Main is the oldest brick building on UNC Pembroke's campus as well. It was built in 1923 but was destroyed by fire and rebuilt in 1979. Old Main originally held administrative offices, classrooms, and an auditorium, but it now holds the Center for Diversity and Inclusion as well as the Museum for Southeastern American Indians. Lumbee Indians have contributed to UNC Pembroke since it was established. The bell tower is known as the Lowry Bell Tower and was named after Mr. Ira Bell Lowry and his wife Reba. Reba wrote the lyrics to UNC Pembroke's alma mater, Hail to UNCP. This university has helped advance our Lumbee people by providing a quality and accessible education at a reasonable price. Also, for our Lumbee youth who are reluctant to leave our tight-knit community, UNC Pembroke is right here at home. Some of our well-known graduates are Kelvin Sampson, who is an American basketball coach, who's coached for college and NBA levels, Adolph Dial, who is a North Carolina representative, as well as an author and former professor at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, Tom Oxendine, who was the first American Indian Navy pilot, and Lorna McNeil, who was the first Lumbee woman to be crowned Miss North Carolina. Do you know why our mascot is the Braves? It's because of our university's heritage as an institution that was founded for the advancement of American Indians. I am a proud Brave, and I want to encourage all of you to work hard in school so you can attend whatever university you'd like. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Lawrence T. Locklear, Director for the Center of Inclusion and Diversity here at UNC Pembroke. Okay, thank you for taking the time out to talk to me, Dr. Locklear. I have a few questions I'd like to ask you. So I'm going to start off with, I want to get to know you a little bit better. How you grew up, where you were born and raised.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you today. I'm from Pembroke, actually the St. Anna community, which is right north of Pembroke. I was born and raised there. My parents are Merle Locklear from the Union Chapel community, and my mother's Mary Ann Strickland from the St. Anna community. So I'm born here in Pembroke, lived here all my life. I'm excited to be a member of the Lumbee tribe.
Okay. In addition to your duties as Director of Student Inclusion and Diversity, you are a Professor of American Indian Studies. Why did you pursue a profession in American Indian Studies?
Well, first of all, I'm a proud Lumbee, proud of our history and culture, but more importantly, I really enjoy sharing that history and culture with Lumbee people as well as non-Lumbee people. I mean, I think we have a history to be very proud of, and I enjoy celebrating that on a regular basis, but any chance I think that I can get to like I said, share that knowledge with non-Lumbee people. I always look forward, and I think teaching is a great way to do that.
This university is the first American Indian university. Why is that significant?
Well, actually, when it comes to state-supported universities, UNC Pembroke is the first higher ed institution for American Indians. There were a couple others that were established about the same time that UNCP was established. Bacon College was established in Oklahoma in 1880, and then there was Haskell Indian Nation Universities in Kansas. They're just a few years older than Pembroke. Each has a little different mission, but Pembroke is the oldest state-supported institution for American Indians. I think it's very important because UNC Pembroke has changed our community. There were a number of opportunities that our people didn't have before the school was established. And when it did, our people finally could transition from just being farmers. We could move into being teachers, we could move into a number of other fields, but also it contributed to the development of a middle-class community here in Robinson and southeastern North Carolina. Because many of our folks, when they were farmers or sharecroppers, they were living on land that they didn't own, and so they weren't able to save money to retire with. You know, we take all that for granted now, but our ancestors, when they were farming, they worked until they died. I mean, and that was the harsh reality of the situation. But by coming to school here, getting an education, being teachers, they could now retire at an early age, have a retirement, start a second career. That meant also that their kids could have better educational opportunities. And so I think just overall it changed the dynamic for our community. But along with education too, I think it helped develop leaders in our community, and that's what an institution of higher education should do. So it helped us educationally, helped us economically, helped develop leaders, but also it served to support our sense of identity and who we are as a people. It was an all-Indian institution between 1887 and 1952. And so when we came to school here in our community, we got to go to school with Lumbee people. There were some Lumbee teachers here, and so it just reinforced our identity and who we are as a people. And I think that is as important, I mean, as all the others. But it was an institution started by us, for us, and it was something that definitely helped elevate the Lumbee community.
Why are the ties to Native American culture important to you, and how do you ensure the university maintains those ties?
Oh my God, my Lumbee identity is central to who I am. When two Lumbee people meet for the first time, one of the first questions they ask is, "Who's your people?" Mm-hmm. You know, we kind of all snicker and laugh a little bit, but when you think about it in terms of our identity and who we are as a people, by asking that question, you're asking for two very important things. You want to know who your blood relatives are, and then what community or geographic area are you from. If you say you are a Hammonds from Saddle Tree, or a Hunt from Fairmont, or a Bullard from Prospect, those all take on whole different meanings. They mean different things to different people. So one, it's important to identify where you're from, and then secondly, you're asking that question because you want to find out if you're related. Are you my people? Are you my cousin? And generally, by the time you talk for a few minutes, you realize that you do know somebody, or you find out that you are related. It might be a little further back on the tree, but it's again about building that relationship and kinship, because as Indian people, again, we're tied to the land, but also we're tied to each other, and having that asking that question is very important to building that.
You worked on a project to create a designated space for Native students on campus. Can you tell me more about that and why it was an important initiative?
Sure. When I worked in the Southeast American Indian Studies program, which was established in 2012, one of our goals was for UNCP to become one of the premier institutions for the study of American Indians in all of the southeastern United States. And the reason we started that here is because UNCP has the largest American Indian student enrollment of any institution on the East Coast. In fact, I think we're in the top 10 nationally as far as Native students are concerned, the number of Native students are concerned. And so we wanted to make sure that when our Native students come to campus, that they have a space where they can hang out and kind of sort of be themselves. Higher education in itself is just a different world. And we want to make sure that we are contributing to students' sense of belonging so that they feel that they do belong here on campus. You kind of would think that that would be automatic since this is in Pembroke and it is in the Lumbee community. But you got to remember the vast majority of students here are not from Robeson County. And so even though this school is situated in the heart of the community, when our students come on campus, they're interacting with individuals that are not like them. And so in order to kind of help with that transition where they learn to navigate diverse communities, we still want to give them a space, a safe space where they can kind of hang out and be themselves, where they can talk about who's your people, or who's bringing the collard sandwich in today, or whose grandma's house are we going to on Sunday to eat, or where are you going to church on Sunday. Those are the kinds of things that Lumbee people ask questions about, and it contributes to our identity. We want to have a place where Lumbee people can be Lumbee people.
In what ways do you feel this university has helped advance Lumbee people?
Like I said before, it's helped us economically, it's helped us develop leaders, it's helped us culturally in the sense that sense of preserving our culture. You know, we have the Department of American Indian Studies here that offers a bachelor's degree in American Indian Studies. We're one of 2 schools on the East Coast that offers that. We also have the Museum of the Southeast American Indian Studies, where folks can come and learn about Lumbees and other Southeastern American Indian people. So this institution has historically served Lumbees and other American Indian peoples, and so it continues to do that today. But we're also offering some other programming and degree programs and other things that we think are of interest to Lumbee people. You know, we're always trying to bring guest speakers to campus to talk about Lumbee related issues. It also supports a number of our Lumbee people who are interested in being athletes, who want to continue their athletic career. Once they finish high school, they come here and they participate in sports, and so it's just kind of a place for our people to continue to grow and enrich their identity as a Lumbee person.
You attended both UNC Greensboro and North Carolina State University.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the major difference in the experience Native students will have at UNC Pembroke versus those universities?
Yeah, I also attended UNC Pembroke too, so I attended all 3 schools.
Okay.
But that's not a problem. I think the big difference between NC State and Greensboro and Pembroke is that State and Greensboro are predominantly white institutions, which means they have a very large white student enrollment. When I went to NC State, there were about 27,000 students, and out of that number, only about 150 were American Indian. So growing up here in Pembroke, everybody that I generally went to school with, churched with, lived with, hung out with, they were Indian. But when I went to NC State, I was the brownest person in the room. And so that was difficult to adjust to, just not being around other American Indian people and having somebody to talk to, somebody who understood my dialect, where I was not having to explain what a Calvinator is and other kinds of things that Lumbee people talk about. But here when you come to Pembroke, it's here in the community. It was established for Lumbees. There's a large number of native Lumbee students on campus who go to class here. And so when you come here, you see people like you, you can interact with other Lumbee people. There's programs and services here on campus for Lumbees and other American Indian students, specifically that are not available at NC State or UNC Greensboro.
We are sharing this segment with school-aged children. Can you tell them why education is so important and what attending an institution of higher learning can offer them?
I think education is key to their future success. I think it's important that students continue to grow as individuals, and I think the best way to do that is to get an education, because education gives you a chance to learn about things that you may not normally be exposed to. That's the great thing about a college campus, is that you have people come to a college campus from all over the world, and they bring all kinds of ideas, worldviews, experiences, and so it's an opportunity to learn about things that you normally wouldn't have a chance to do. But also, you consider the current job market. Just having a high school diploma is not going to allow you to advance like having a college degree does. I mean, studies and statistics show that if you have a college degree, you're going to make more money, you're going to have a better lifestyle, you can afford more things, you're just going to live longer. And so, those are a few reasons why having a college degree would be very important.
Can you tell me one thing that you love most about being Native and about this university?
Oh wow, I could talk for an hour about all those, but we're not going to do that. But the thing I like about being native is just I love this connection to this place. I love being around my people. We all have a shared experience, shared story. That there's things we don't have to explain to each other when we talk to each other, but we can be proud of talking about Hillsbury Lowry, running the Ku Klux Klan out of Robson County, the establishment of this institution. All those things are important to us, and being able to share that as a people is really important. As far as the university, I really like the idea of being able to work in my home community, work in higher education, but also help Lumbee native and all students grow and develop as individuals and contributing members of society. So I think UNCP allows me to do that.
And is there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
I just want to thank you for this opportunity to talk about Lumbee people and talk about UNC Pembroke.
Thank you so much.
Hello everyone, I'm Kennedy Locklear, Junior Miss Lumbee 2019-2020-21. Here with me I have Mr. Lacey Cummings. Today we'll be talking about the dependency of Lumbee people on land and farming for survival throughout the years. So Mr. Lacey, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm Lacey Cummings, live here in Mount Airy community, raised in Mount Airy community, 66 years old right now, and we been farming all my life. I'm a member at Mount Airy Baptist Church, and I'm a deacon at our church too.
Was farming important in your childhood, Mr. Lacey?
It was very important. I was raised up on the farm with my family. We always farmed. When I was a small kid, I started farming, helping my father. My sisters was working on the farm, and then as I grew older, I became more interested in wanting to farm for myself and wanted to be a farmer. But it was very important to me and learning what to do on the farm and where I'm at today.
Could you explain a typical farming day from years ago and how it's changed to now?
Yes, it's changed tremendously. When I started helping my father, we had a mule and a one-row tractor, and it continued growing until we got up to a two-row tractor. And when I started farming myself, I continued using the two-row tractor, and up to now we are got 12-row pieces of equipment. You see what large equipment we have around us today compared to how small it was back then.
How is farming important to the Lumbee people?
Farming is very important to our people because that's where we was raised. That's what we was raised to do, was to farm, and we was sharecroppers. We worked together with one another, and we learned to manage our farm and to make a living on our farm. And it's been very important, and it's brought us from where we are today, from where we came from. It's brought us a long ways.
Mr. Lacey, have you ever cropped tobacco?
Yes, I have cropped tobacco. When I was 10 years old, I started cropping tobacco, helping my father and my uncles, my aunts. We sharecropped, and we worked with one another. We would help them, they would help us, and I learned crop tobacco then, and I cropped 6 days a week for the whole season up till I got 18 years old and started farming on my own.
Mr. Lacey, have you ever grew your own vegetables?
Yeah, when we was coming up with my parents, we grew our own vegetables. My mother would always grow corn and put it in the freezer. We grew peas, tomatoes, okra, cucumbers, and we always put them in the freezer or otherwise can them. And that's how we survived in the winter with our vegetables we grew and produced for ourselves.
How has that changed over the years?
typically now you don't very seldom see people that's growing vegetables for themselves. They go to the pick your own produce stands and buy, and some of them still cans of vegetables, but most of the time they don't grow them themselves. They just buy them.
Could you tell us a little bit about this piece of equipment behind us?
Yeah, this here is a combiner. It's a 5140 combiner, about 2 years old. We cut our corn, beans, wheat with this, and it does a very good job for us. We can cut about 60 to 65 acres a day with it.
Mr. Lacey, how important is it to get an education if you would like to become a farmer?
Today, technology that we need to have for farming is very important. I would advise anyone that's going to go into a farming career, whether he's going working for his father or continue working for himself, he needs to go at least a 2-year agriculture class, or you otherwise get a 4-year degree in it, because it's very important for things that's taking place in farming today that we need to know about our soil, our chemists, our fertilizer that we need to produce our crops.
Thank you guys for having me tell you a little bit about farming, and thank you Mr. Lacey for having me.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. I am your 2019-2021 Little Miss Lumbee Riley Dial. Today I have the privilege of speaking with you about powwows. A powwow is a celebration of Native American culture where different indigenous nations gather for singing, dancing, and honoring the traditions of their ancestors. Powwows are important because it is a way to honor and preserve the Native American culture. Before the term powwow became popular, other words were used to describe this cultural event. Some of these included celebration, fair, feast, festival, gathering, happening, Indian dance, rodeo, show, and union. The term powwow is a northeastern woodland word, and the closest English translation is meeting. Powwows take place over a period of 1 to 4 days and often draws dancers, singers, artists, and traders from hundreds of miles away. Powwows can be public or private. A lot of planning and hard work goes into organizing a powwow. Planning for a powwow generally begins months, perhaps even a year, in advance of the event by a group of people usually referred to as a powwow committee. A powwow committee consists of a number of people who do all the planning before the event. The committee is responsible for recruiting and hiring the head staff, advertising the powwow, finding a location, and getting vendors who set up and sell food or merchandise at the powwow. The head staff of a powwow are the people who run the event of the day it occurs. The arena director is the person in charge during the powwow. The master of ceremonies, or MC, is the voice of the powwow. It is his job to keep the singers, dancers, and public informed as to what is happening. The head dancers consist of the headman dancer and head woman dancer. Host drums are responsible for singing the songs at the beginning and the end of a powwow session. A powwow session begins with the grand entry and in most cases a prayer. The Eagle staff leads the grand entry, followed by flags and then the dancers, while one of the host drums sings an opening song. This event is sacred in nature, and some powwows do not allow filming or photography during this time. There are many different categories of dance, and I would like to share just a few of those with you. Men's fancy dance, or fancy feather dance, is a dance featuring vivid regalia with dramatic movement including spins and leaps. Fancy dancers are distinguished by their bright colored regalia, which consists of 2 large bustles worn on the upper and lower back. Women's Fancy Show is a dance featuring women wearing brilliant colors, a long fringed and decorated show, performing fast spins and elaborate dance steps. Women's Traditional is a dance featuring traditional regalia of cloth or leather and dancers who perform with precise, highly controlled movements. Grass dance is a dance featuring regalia with long flowing fringe and designs that look like grass blowing in the wind. Dance movements are more elaborate than the traditional dancers, but less flashy than the fancy dancers. And last but not least, my favorite dance, the woman's jingle dress, also known as a healing dance, includes a skirt with hundreds of small tin cones that make noise as the dancers move with light footwork, dance close to the ground. When you attend a powwow, you may notice the audience forms a circle around the dancing grounds and the powwow dancers make up the center of the circle. The circle is an important symbol in Native American culture. The circle represents the sun, the moon, the cycles of the seasons, and the cycle of life to death to rebirth. If you attend a powwow, you must remember not to walk across the dance area or across a circle. Participants can only walk or dance in a clockwise circle around the host drum. The beats of a drum represent Mother Earth, who all life revolves around. The circular shape of the drum and the direction of the dancers represents unity. A powwow brings the circle of people closer to friends, family, and culture. It's like a giant family reunion where tribes can get together and celebrate. Thank you for allowing me to share some Native American culture with you. It has been an honor, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please remember to social distance and wear your mask at all times. Stay safe.
We hope you all found this informative, and thank you for allowing us to share our culture with you.
Thanks for watching!